Hey, I've got a new book out. It's called Dollbloods. It's a nice piece of comedic fantasy, inspired by stuff like Terry Pratchett and Yancey Crowshaw's first novel, Mogworld. If you're looking for something new to read and feel like supporting a struggling indie, check it out. Links are in the description.
Yeah, autism is a hell of a drug.
Alright, welcome to Off the Cuff, the first of many, maybe the one and only, video essay of whatever gets stuck in my head. This is something that happens to me from time to time. I check something out, catch a gander of it, get curious, and decide to investigate, only to discover something that I end up becoming hyperfixated on, and it winds up stuck in my head for days, weeks, or even months, regardless if I like it or not. One of the earliest instances I can remember of this happening was when I was a kid with the movie Waterworld. It aired on TV at the time, and I didn't like it. But I hated how I just could not stop thinking about that bloody movie. So the reason why I've made this video essay is just to vent these thoughts out of my head and maybe entertain a few people in the process. The thoughts and hyperfixation I've had for the last couple months now have been about something drastically different to Waterworld. My Little Pony. The recent 5th generation to be exact. To make things clear, I actually did used to watch Friendship is Magic back in the day. Feel free to laugh. And regardless of how you feel about the fandom that surrounds it, there's no denying the quality of that show. It had great humor, likable fleshed out characters, solid world building, and it went above and beyond when it came to breaking the mold of not just children's entertainment, but entertainment aimed at young girls, with it successfully appealing to not only an adult audience, but an adult audience of men. Hell, it even had a proper ending. That's something that most beloved classic cartoons have rarely been able to earn, let alone just receive. Anyway, it was during New Year's Eve last year that a random thought crossed my mind. Maybe I should check out the New Generation movie, which was the movie used to kick off the current generation of My Little Pony, and so I did on New Year's Day. And it was great! Consider this a micro review of the film, but yeah, it was a great family film. The animation was well done, the characters are likable, the song's catchy with the Angry Mob song being a real earworm, the writing had a really good sense of humor and wit. I also liked the sense of mystery of how the world became magicless, and came away from it actually wanting to see more of the characters and answers to the questions it raised. And that led to me checking out the follow-up cartoon, Make Your Mark. And it was a disappointment. I know it's a cartoon aimed at young girls, and I'm a 32-year-old man, far from the target audience to say the least, but to go from a family film that was great and literally anyone could enjoy, to a series that's mostly average was quite the disappointment. Now, it's fine if you like Make Your Mark. Hell, I'll even admit, it's not a bad piece of children's entertainment, and there are some episodes and even scenes that I do like, and I can see myself rewatching, and I don't hate it or Gen 5 as a whole, but there is no way you can compare Make Your Mark to Friendship is Magic, and it doesn't end up the inferior of the two. But it didn't have to be this way. While this cartoon and its characters may have been stuck in my head, I wound up doing some involuntary research, and came up with a few ideas why the cartoon wound up the way it did, as well as some ideas for some rewrites to improve some parts of the show, and I even have an idea for a soft reboot. A brief aside. A lot of my ideas for this video came from seeing the reviews, breakdowns, and analysis of Gen 5 by Starstrike and Master Code Ace. If you're at all interested in getting an idea of Make Your Mark's strengths and weaknesses without actually watching it, check them out, they actually do good work. Also, before I begin, I want to make it clear that this isn't me stating fact. This is just my personal speculation based on what I've seen of Gen 5, factual evidence, as well as my own thoughts. Now, let's get into the meat of things with the reason why I think Make Your Mark didn't work out in the end. This wasn't something I was going to include initially, but after thinking it over, I do think this can be considered to be a credible factor. Call this a reason zero. The director of New Generation himself, Jose Luis Ucha. He has admitted that while working on the movie, he and the writers penned plot points without any planning or collaboration with the writing team for Make Your Mark. This is my own instincts as an author talking here, but this was a terrible decision on his part. Throwing in all sorts of random bits and bobs like the Unity Crystals, without thinking out the lore behind them, how they connect back to the events of Friendship is Magic, or how they connect to how the world is by the time of the movie, was just idiotic. He admitted that he trusted the show's writers to take what he and the film's writers came up with to effectively build on them. Now, I do applaud him for trusting the Make Your Mark team to do this effectively, but he should have had them involved from the get-go so they could properly flesh things out. The result has been lore that's been poorly explained or barely touched on in the background, where it's hard to see. A brief side tangent here, but I have ideas for potential book series, one aimed at kids and teens, the other for an older audience. I haven't started writing them, but that's because they're both at the conceptual stage. I'm fleshing things out like the lore, the characters, timeline, and settings as much as I can before I even try to commit anything to being written. This is because I want to nail down how exactly the settings and characters for either work, in order to avoid issues Make Your Mark suffers from. Now, let's move on to what I see as the most likely reason for Make Your Mark's failings: the writers. They were not the right people for the job. The characters go back and forth between feeling on point from their portrayal in the movie to being drastically different. Great ideas are either underdeveloped or outright wasted. There's a lack of conflict in a good chunk of the episodes. The wit and humor from the movie is just gone. There's an over-reliance on magical Deus Ex Machina, even when it makes no sense, and worst of all, the characters regularly waste time by just faffing about doing nothing. But despite this, some genuine good does manage to shine through. The show has plenty of examples of healthy and happy family dynamics. Hitch is a good example of a single dad trying his best rather than just an oaf, a Homer Simpson type character. While we don't get to see much of it, there are times where the lore shines through and is interesting. The cultural shifts between the three pony tribes are also interesting and make them feel unique. I also like how there is a clear development in technology with smartphones being a thing, and I do think they handle that fairly well for the most part. The show also doesn't try to push any weird messaging onto kids. You can actually let your kids watch it and know they're not gonna be told some weird nonsense. And there is something to love about the main villain, an evil alicorn named Opaline. I love the idea behind her. An abusive parental guardian, a monstrous narcissist who lies, gaslights, and manipulates her minion, the character Misty. When she's introduced, she acts as a great example for kids how parental abuse can be more than just hitting, and teach them what to look for if they or their friend is a potential victim of it. But of course, she is undermined by the fact that as the show goes on, they make her feel less of a credible threat to the protagonists, with their plans being mediocre or having no bearing on the main plot, and just winding up as minor nuisances. Skeletor, Gargamel, and Leatherface from the 4th Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, they're all more effective antagonists that, while comical, still come off as legitimate threats. The writers either lacked the skill, the creativity, or possibly even the right restrictions to realize the creative vision they had in mind, which is driven home by the greater success of Tell Your Tale. While Make Your Mark was meant to be the flagship adventure show with a story, Tell Your Tale on the other hand was meant to be a side series of 5-minute shorts here on YouTube, with a greater focus on slice of life stories and comedy. The tighter time frame meant there was no room for faffing about, and the writers had to use the runtime more effectively, and it shows, considering Tell Your Tale is still going while Make Your Mark has been cancelled after one season that was stretched over a few years. The end result is that the jokes managed to be more regularly consistent for what they are, as well as some short stories that would have worked as the premise for the B-plot to some episodes of Make Your Mark, if not an entire episode. I'll point out an example later. Now, as for the second most likely reason, the suits at Hasbro. I wouldn't be surprised if it turned out the writers of Make Your Mark did have an idea for a series that would appeal to both the Brony fandom and the target audience of kids. But since this show is based on a corporate IP, that means they had to adhere to mandates of what could and couldn't happen from the corpos. Under the leadership of current CEO Chris Cox, we've seen things like the de-fantasying of Dungeons & Dragons with stuff like frickin' Mexican orcs of all things, the Pinkertons being sent after a Magic the Gathering fan, Hasbro being the reason for Larian abandoning Baldur's Gate 3, the mishandling of their movie division and promotion of the Dungeons & Dragons movie, the decline of Power Rangers, and the company going out and licensing their toys to other companies that have been their rivals in the past. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was a mandate put in place by a corpo idiot who decided to pull a Bob Iger. Fun fact, when Disney bought Star Wars, the plan was for their theme park expansion, Galaxy's Edge, to be original trilogy themed. But after talking to the new head of Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy, Iger, the CEO at the time and now, gave the green light for it to be sequel themed instead. This was before The Force Awakens was out, and if they knew people even liked the characters. The rest is history. So it isn't beyond the realm of reason that there was a corpo at Hasbro who went, yeah, just put it out, kids will like it because they're kids, and the fans will like it because they're fans. They like the brand. What? No, they don't like The Last Generation because of the characters, stories, humor, or quality. It was the brand. They'll buy it because of the brand. No matter what. This is a mindset that has long since been proven wrong, and is a recurring problem these days whenever corpos get their hands on a creative work. Now, as for what I see as the least likely reason for Make Your Mark's failings, That would be a potential rights issue. Apparently, the rights to Friendship is Magic are split between Hasbro and Discovery. Something like this isn't unheard of. A good example would be the No One Lives Forever games. Night Dive Studios have been trying to remaster those for a long time, but because the rights are split 3 ways, it's been impossible to hash out a deal where all 3 parties can agree with them. The TV channel Friendship is Magic aired on was a joint venture between the 2 companies, with Hasbro owning a majority stake and Discovery a minority. But in 2014, the ownership deal was renegotiated, with Discovery gaining a majority ownership while Hasbro becoming a minority stakeholder in exchange for a fat bag of cash. Now, an aspect of this deal was that Discovery gained ownership of the rights to Season 5 and onward of Friendship is Magic. Apparently, when Make Your Mark was being planned, it was going to have very strong and obvious connections to Friendship is Magic, but these were tied to things from those later seasons. Hasbro either couldn't, wouldn't, or didn't care to resecure the rights, and didn't tell the writers until they'd already put most of the work in. This apparently led to scripts needing to be rewritten at the last minute, and some episodes even needing to be reanimated to get rid of these connections. Thing is, I have 2 reasons why I see this as the least likely reason for the show's quality. First is because this makes no sense to me. At the time of Friendship is Magic's airing, My Little Pony was a literal license to print money for Hasbro, so I am doubtful they would have agreed to a deal that would have affected their ability to make money on the residuals from toys, merch, DVD sales, and streaming with characters they own and are beloved. Never mind, just what the hell would Discovery do with a bunch of characters and stories they really couldn't do anything with? Not at least without buying out the rest of the IP or taking some very extreme creative liberties. For an example, look at what Ken Penders has been doing with the Archie Sonic the Hedgehog characters he created and has since modified with his new comic, The Lara Sue Chronicles. The other reason is because the evidence that this happened is only secondhand gossip at best. Now, there was a Q&A panel at a convention where some of the Make Your Mark writers were asked about the show's quality. They said the rights were split, them not being told until too late, and the last-minute rewrites being the reason. But the only evidence that this happened has been word of mouth, with some people claimed it happened at one convention, when evidence confirms that the panel in question happened at another. However, this panel was just never recorded, so with no hard evidence to back up the word of mouth, it is hard to take credibly. But even if this is true and it was the case, this does reinforce my earlier claims about the writers. If they couldn't rework the scripts around these rights issues, then that shows the shallowness of their creativity. Even under crunch, creativity can shine through and make something memorable. Like the movie Apocalypse Now. I know comparing the two is like comparing oranges to gummy bears. Production on that was an absolute shit show, to put it simply. Yet it became one of the greatest movies ever made. Getting back on point, I'll use this as a hypothetical example for the cartoon. Let's say there was an episode that revolved around the characters of Make Your Mark discovering some ancient ruins from Twilight's time. As they explore, they discover that, wow, these ruins weren't made by ponies, but by changelings, with frequent references to a character from that show named Thorax. Now with the rights issue, this is how I'd change it to keep this plot intact. Assuming the only real problem was the mentioning of Thorax, let's just keep him vague then. Only refer to him as the Changeling King, or better yet, let's take advantage of the ambiguity of the timeline. Create some new ancient Changeling King that can be considered his heir or descendant. But if there are still issues with how the Changelings are depicted in the background through old art, no worries. We'll modify how they're depicted so they're still recognizable but also legally distinct. Would that be the best solution? No, but it would be a solution that could work, and the ambiguity of the timeline between the generations would work in its favour. Now, with all that being said, I believe it's now time for me to get onto my idea for some rewrites. These would improve issues I have with some of the episodes, and by extension, the show as a whole. In the Tell Your Tale series, there's an episode where we're introduced to a secondary character named Rufus, but here he's referred to by his stage name, Hoofdini, an Earth Pony stage magician whose career is going through a rough patch thanks to the return of real magic. Everyone can see through his sleight of hand, and everything he can do, real magic can do far better. So Izzy tries to help him find a new job where his talents will be appreciated. This touches on an aspect of Gen 5 that I feel the writers just did not realize was a golden opportunity for stories. A world that for the longest time was mundane but has now suddenly become fantastical again? So let's lean into that. Let's make this story the B-plot to the episode where the Earth Ponies are struggling to control their magic. While Hitch is busy siding ponies and banning them from spontaneously growing plants, Izzy is helping Rufus out. He's lamenting his failure to find work. Hell, let's even see his house. We could see that he's a collector of magic memorabilia and could even be revealed he owns Trixie's hat and cape. Add a little world building with the possibility he might even be her descendant. The episode would flow like usual, but during the climax, it would be Rufus using the fine control he has over his magic to save the kids from the giant berry Sprout grew. Everyone would then praise him as a hero and decide to let him be the one to teach how to properly use Earth Pony magic. We'd then cap off the episode with him starting the first lesson in the style of one of his stage shows. Next, let's tackle a plot point from the episode Ali Cond, the compact mirror. Opaline uses this to communicate with Sunny, posing as her inner voice to try and tempt her towards selfishly embracing her power and status as an alicorn. That is fine, but it is retarded how this plot point is just abandoned after this episode. So let's make it a recurring element. Each episode, we have a scene where Sunny has a moment of doubt. Boom, there's Opaline whispering in her ear, trying to manipulate her, to help her with her schemes, and we even see Sunny take her advice once or twice. But once we get to the confrontation between Opaline and the main five, well, realizing it was Opaline trying to manipulate her, she throws the compact away. And there we go, a substantial improvement for the plot, rather than just forgetting about it until it's convenient in the moment. Now let's tackle the Cantor Logic episode. We'll keep the B plot about Sunny and the others asking everyone about what they should do for the factory, as it was, but meanwhile, Hitch and Pip still explore the odd noises coming from deeper in the factory. What will change is what happens when Sprout appears. Instead of the three of them running into a bunch of rats from Zephyr Heights, Hitch and Pip find the factory's machinery has been up and running again. When they ask Sprout just why he's trying to restart it, he refuses to tell them and tries to get them to leave. Pip then accidentally gets caught in the assembly line, and as Hitch and Sprout try to save her, Sprout gets caught as well while Hitch goes on to shut the machines down and save them. They demand to know what Sprout was doing, and that's when he reveals that the reason he was trying to revive Cantor Logic was because he's tired of feeling disrespected by everyone, ever since he finished his community service as punishment from the events of the movie. He wanted to restart the company with the products we saw in the film, retrofitted to benefit the non-Earth ponies, now living in Maritime Bay. He then shows them some prototypes he slapped together, and of course, they suck. Hitch and Pip gently tell him that his plan isn't going to work, just as the others come back with their plans to turn the factory into a streaming studio. To which, Sprout angrily points out that his family does still own the factory, and he won't let them just do whatever they want with it. But Hitch then butters him up by pointing out he could be the studio's manager, a position that comes with a lot of respect and getting him on board with the idea. Doing this gets rid of a lot of the aimless faffing about that plagues this episode, and also lays the foundation for what should have been planned from the beginning, a redemption arc for Sprout. Now, the last rewrite I came up with would be for the Night Market episodes. These are fine as they are, but I find they could be better with just a few small changes. For one, let's make it so the key that Misty is given, instead of just sending her to a random part of Bridalwood, instead sends her to a world based on her recent nightmares. She follows after her younger self from the dream, remembering the events from her past her actions represent, while also running away from a Silent Hill-esque shadowy figure that's following her. When we get to the scene where she sees how Opaline kidnapped her, let's also then see what their first interaction was like. Let's see what she told Misty to make her trust her. Then we get the big reveal that the shadowy figure was her dad, a younger Alpha Biddle. He fades away, and Misty proceeds to use the key to unlock the door to return to the Night Market. Meanwhile, the rest of the main six are looking for her. The baby dragon Sparky finds the dragon artifact stall, these partially reinvigorate him, and the breezy manning it gives them one half of the map to the Dragonlands. From here, the next episode would follow as normal. The discovery of the other half of the map occurring like the full one's discovery in the show would still happen as it did in a later episode. Now, as for my soft reboot idea, it would address some other issues with the characters, such as giving Sunny motivation that would make her into a more adventurous version of Twilight Sparkle, if nothing else. I think she's more interested in history specifically, rather than just books in general, and is willing to be a bit more adventurous. It would also make the show more in line with what it was supposed to be, a fantasy adventure series, with plenty of comedy and some slice-of-life stories mixed in. The first half of the first season of this soft reboot would revolve around Opaline escaping the Together Tree. In the process, her cutie mark gets sent off to an unknown location, and with it gone, she's lost almost all of what little magic she has left. Putting it to use, she disguises herself as an Earth Pony and goes on to reside in Maritime Bay, gathering the resources she needs to perform a ritual to pinpoint her mark's location, all the while causing problems for the residents of Maritime Bay. The second half would focus on the main six trailing Opaline as she pursues her mark, along the way exploring more of this modern Equestria's world, its lore, other locations, new characters, and even reveal Opaline's origin and her status as an unreliable narrator when it came to her past and history. Personally, I like the idea that as a narcissist, she wasn't entirely honest about who she really was, where she came from, and how she became a threat in the first place. My idea for an origin is that, okay, they mentioned the city of Skyro, so let's go with that. Let's say Opaline was, hypothetically, a daughter to an alicorn princess, but she was just born a regular unicorn. She was still a noble and she was still respected, but she wasn't exactly the epitome of magic in any capacity. But then, along came Celestia and Luna, born from two servants. And immediately, they were given much more respect because, for the first time ever, as far as anyone knew, some Alicorns had been born naturally. This would then eat away at Opaline, causing her to try to ascend to Alicornhood through less than savory methods. After returning, she was cast out and exiled for her dark ascension. She swore revenge, came back, destroyed Skyros, but couldn't take down Celestia and Luna. But she was able to escape from them and go into hiding, waiting for the right time to emerge from the shadows when everyone had forgotten about her to claim what she saw as her rightful throne. That origin I thought up would work rather well. Now, in the end of this first season, she is defeated, depowered, and possibly turned either into an earth pony or back into a unicorn before being locked up in Maritime Bay Jail as an ironic punishment. Season 2 would introduce a Bridlewood legend called the Stone Brothers. There were these two unicorn brothers who got into a fight and turned each other to stone. Izzy would show Sunny and Comet where the legend happened, and Comet, being clumsy, would accidentally free the brothers. Unaware of their displacement, the brothers would continue their fight, causing chaos, until finally stopped by Sunny. That's when they reveal they're not brothers, they're cousins. In fact, they're the sons of Celestia and Luna, the former being a himbo and the latter being a regal gentleman. The himbo unicorn reveals that the two go into a fight while looking for his actual brother, his twin brother, who is revealed to be an earth pony who had been turned to stone as well. Finding him hidden beneath moss and bushes, they free him, and now the three have to learn to live in this strange new world. Over the season, there'd then be this unseen figure going about causing problems, with a recurring B-plot involving Hitch trying to catch this lawbreaker, with him delusionally beginning to see this figure as a Joker-like nemesis, creating an excuse to bring back the glitter duty joke, which, I'll be honest, was a nice nod at Batman. Eventually, it would be revealed that the figure was the himbo's brother, revealing he orchestrated the events leading to the cousins' fight as well. He was trying to enact a plan to become an Alicorn by stealing magic, but this happened the same time magic was sealed away, so things went haywire and the three were turned to stone. He's hatched a new scheme to ascend and fix what he sees as a broken world, using a device he's built that simulates unicorn magic by using his earth pony magic as fuel. He recreates the time travel spell Starlight, Glimmer, and Twilight used to go back in time, and he goes to stop Opaline's original attempt at conquering Equestria. Sunny and Hitch, they get dragged along into the past and try to stop him, fail, and return to a different Equestria. One that's more prosperous, unified. Sunny's dad is still alive, and Twilight's former student. But something isn't right. Their friends also still exist as well, but they're now more mean-spirited. The cultural shift between the generations never happened. The unicorns look down on the Pegasi look down on the Earth Ponies, and the Earth Ponies look down on the unicorns. Sunny and Hitch go on to meet Twilight, who laments how this Equestria is heading towards a terrible collapse. Despite her efforts, shady people have twisted her messages on the magic of friendship, and she's powerless to stop it from happening. When Sunny mentions Celestia's son, Twilight reveals that he came to her, told her how he changed the past and expected her to reward him with ascension. Instead, she demanded to know what he changed so she could undo it before he escaped back to the past again. So to set things right, Twilight sends the two back with a magical boon. They succeed and return to a restored timeline. The Earth Pony brother is then locked up in Bridlewood as punishment, and it's revealed that the boon from Twilight was a spell that will affect him until Sunny decides to undo it. It blocks his Earth Pony magic, making it impossible for him to do the magic that comes naturally, as well as use another unicorn device. Beyond that, I don't have an idea for a third season, but I do have ideas for plot points that could be used for one. Stuff like the revelation that the Unity Crystals were a nuclear option and were meant to be destroyed once the threat of Opaline was dealt with, allowing magic to flow freely again. The revelation that the heart locket Sunny has was also created by Twilight to both act as a defensive weapon and the hammer to destroy the crystals when the time was right. Sunny would also go on to become a full Alicorn with the physical wings and horn, and maybe, just for the hell of it, let's even throw in the return of Chrysalis, Cozy Glow, and Tyrek. The Villain Stone Prison could be unknowingly held by the Pegasi in statue storage, and one day they're accidentally set free. But thanks to how different magic functions now, they're no longer capable of being the same potential threats they used to be. The characters are still wary of them as they become the focal point for a season-long B-plot that could tie back into Sprout's own redemption arc and their desire to not be re-imprisoned again. At the same time, a new original villain could then go about doing their thing. Needs a bit of work, but that could work. To wrap all this up, I want to reiterate, I don't hate Make Your Mark, but I don't love it either. It's a perfectly fine piece of children's entertainment that's not going to do anything malicious to your kids, despite being a disappointing follow-up to what came before. But I see potential for how this could have been closer in quality to what Law and Faust did with Friendship is Magic, and with the success of Tell Your Tale, I hope it is given a second chance, or at the very least, we're given some other kind of show that tries to do what it set out to do. That's everything I had to say. So please, tell me, what do you think of what I've done here? Throw your thoughts in the comments. Do you want to see more content like this? When another thought like this gets stuck in my head? Let me know. Thanks again for watching all the way through.